All right, chapter 8. We are almost there. I hope you enjoyed a pretty short chapter. It was pretty simple. There weren't a lot of real crazy things that happened. It's more of a settling in that we see. And we notice something kind of noticeable about the narrator, which we will talk about at the end of the video. I'll make you wait for it, kind of like Daphne du Maurier does. We're going to try something different with this video. Rather than just go through and tell you everything that happens, I noticed 3 really specific themes in this chapter, and I want to show you how those themes were built in chapter 8. So the 3 themes I want to cover are, number 1, order and routine. Number 2, an inferiority complex. Okay, so feeling like you're less than others. And number 3, stranger in your own house. All right, so these are the 3 things that I noticed in this chapter that we can kind of go through. And rather than go through the book, I'm going to go through my notes so you can see how I take notes and how I kind of categorize things. Maybe you could adopt some of these strategies too when you start to notice trends. All right, so the first thing we noticed in chapter 8 was order and routine, and that was pretty evident right at the beginning when she says, "I never realized that life would be so orderly and planned." Right? So the theme was introduced in the first sentence, but we see throughout the chapter that being built. The idea that breakfast is laid out every morning. She was kind of questioning why does Max eat so little and they put out so much food? That must be wasteful, but every morning there's going to be a bunch of food. That's part of the routine at Manderley. We also see that after breakfast, the narrator feels that she is supposed to go to the drawing room because that's the order of Manderley. That's how things work. She went to a different room and it was cold, and the servant was like, "No, this is how we do things here." Right? So she's kind of falling into the order of Manderley, but really what she's doing is she's following into the order of Rebecca. And what we're seeing is she's kind of becoming Rebecca. She feels like she needs to become Rebecca. And she sits down at the writing desk and she sees how orderly it is. Here are the letters that need to go out. Here are the menus. Here's everything. And she sits down and says, okay, these are the things that I should be doing. These are the routines that I should be partaking in. We see a lot of that order stemming from Rebecca and tradition. So we see Frith and we see Danvers saying, well, this is how De Winter did it. This is how Mrs. De Winter did it. So the narrator feels like, well, this is the way that I am supposed to be doing it. And I think that was most prevalent when Danvers called her. There was like that really awkward exchange where she's like, oh, Mrs. De Winter's dead, and she doesn't realize it's her. But during that phone call, she says something about the sauces. And she goes, okay, well, what kind of sauce would Rebecca have had? Okay, well, we'll have that sauce too. And this is a little bit concerning for me. It's a red flag because Max wanted her to be herself. And what we're seeing is the narrator is not being true to herself. She's falling into the order and routine of his last wife, which is probably not what he wants, but she doesn't know any better. So that was the first one, so order and routine. The second one is the inferiority complex. We see lots of instances in which she feels that she's not enough or she's not as good as who was there before. We see that with, she mentioned it herself, that poise, grace, and assurance were not qualities that were inbred in her. So we already see that lack of assurance in herself, but we've seen that throughout the book, so we know that that's here. But in terms of Manderley itself, she was worried that the servants were laughing at her when she was lost in the house and she didn't really know what to do, and so she thought the servants were off somewhere laughing about her. When she sat down at the writing desk, she felt like she was wasting time. She didn't have anything to do, and Rebecca was probably super busy, and that she was writing 4 or 5 letters after breakfast, and she's sitting at that desk like, I guess I'll write a note to Mrs. Van Hopper because I have nothing better to do. And so she feels like she's not as busy or good as Rebecca. She feels inferior to her. She also kind of feels inferior to the servants, which kind of speaks to her ambiguous social class a little bit. She's not used to having servants, and she feels that she's at the same level, if not underneath them, which is a problem that leads us to our next theme, which is the stranger in the house. She feels that she is not really welcome in her own house. She is now the lady of the house. She is in charge of things. She runs the whole thing. Max left for the day. This is her house to run, to enjoy, and she feels like she's a stranger. And I think that's evidenced by her being lost, her not knowing where things are, her not feeling confident enough to ask the servants who are hired to help her for help. She feels that she needs to do it herself because she doesn't have a relationship with them. She feels like she doesn't belong. There was another time where she said she didn't want to disturb the chambermaids, so she walked a different path throughout the house so she wouldn't disturb the servants of the house. She can't find things in the house like matches. This was really evidenced when she was at the writing desk. A lot of the themes were really developed when she was sitting at the writing desk and she pulled out the piece of paper that had the letterhead that said Manderley and R. De Winter on it. She said she felt guilty, as if she was staying in somebody else's house. And this is a real problem, and I think that this also helps to build the setting of Manderley as somewhere that's vast and big. We mentioned that a Gothic convention is the labyrinth. It almost feels as if she's running through a maze or a labyrinth trying to just start her morning. So there is a lot of that awkward, lonely tension that is building in chapter 8, and we're kind of seeing kind of what we thought we would see out of the narrator. We knew that her going to Manderley wasn't going to be this wonderful, great thing where she was just going to settle into this nice mansion and be rich and famous and powerful. And, she's really her inefficiencies, I guess we could say, or her negative qualities are really being highlighted as she is alone in this house, and the awkwardness that she has isn't really helping her because she's not building relationships with people. She's sinking more inside of herself, and the more she is alone, the more she's getting inside of her own head and starting to let these feelings of jealousy fester and eventually boil over, which is something that we can start to look forward to because the writing is on the wall. We see that it's coming, and chapter 8 is a nice transition into that. So, hope that you enjoyed. We have 2 more chapters left before the end of winter break, and I hope that you enjoy the next 2 chapters. I will see you for chapter 9.